It looked like somebody was bent over and had their head in the window of the deer blind. It either heard me or smelt me, and he pulled his head out of the tent and stood straight up, and that shocked me. They don't make people that big.
The way it moved, almost as if it was gliding across the beach. I've never seen anything move like that in my life. They were screaming at each other in gibberish. It sounded like a language, and they were chuntering away back and forwards, back and forwards, back and forwards. I know what a bear looks like, and there is no way on this planet that what I saw were bears.
911, what are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
Gia!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
Hi, I'm James Wafer from Liverpool, UK, and I'm listening to real-life diabolical accounts on Sasquatch Chronicles.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you. We're going to be chatting with Patrick, and Patrick comes to us from Missouri. He had a very strange night when he was actually out hunting, and I'll let Patrick get into it, but I'll play a little sounds for you tonight, maybe kind of hear what he heard that night. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. And if you get a chance, check out sasquatchchronicles.com. You can become a member and get additional shows. Let's jump into it tonight. I want to welcome Patrick to the show. Patrick, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Wes.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here, Patrick. If you would you just kind of start from the very beginning? Kind of tell us what you were doing and walk us into what happened.
All right, well, I'd basically been in these woods ever since I was old enough to run in the woods by myself, since I was about 8 years old. My sisters always lived on this property. It was just off the Meramec River in a town called St Clair. And I don't know that it really pertains to the story, but earlier that day, I had been out to a cave that's right on the river, where later on I had some other experiences. But I was deer hunting that year out on my sister's property. I had a blind set up. You know, it was back against the wood line, little opening facing the field. And at this point in time, you know, I'd been hunting for a couple weeks since deer season opened, and I'd noticed over a few day period that the deer had not been coming out like they were. You know, I'd see, you know, some does and stuff in the afternoon, and we were seeing them on our game cams, but then all of a sudden it just seemed like they weren't around. And my sister had just recently lost her job that she had had for 35 years at a nursing home because she was, you know, deemed to be too old to do the job. So they let her go. And I had also gotten laid off at the time. So, and I always try to be an ethical hunter, but at this point, I kind of, she hadn't been getting anything in return, like she was getting her unemployment, but her husband was disabled. So I was looking more towards, we need to get some food on the table. I was trying to help her out, trying to help me out.
It's understandable. Yeah, absolutely.
And so, and I don't, generally hunt like this, but at this point in my life, I figured it was what I needed to do. So I asked her, I said, I think the bucks are chasing the does early. They're running around at night. That's why we're not seeing them at day. So I asked her, I was like, do you mind if I go sit in the deer blind during the night? And she's like, no, I don't mind. She's like, I'd really like to have some deer meat on the table. So, and like I said, earlier that day, before I went hunting, I went down to the cave and was just messing around. And then I had walked from the cave directly to my deer blind, and I got settled in. And, didn't see anything, didn't really hear anything in the evening. And I ended up falling asleep. I think it was around 8 o'clock. I had a blanket and stuff in there with me, so, I was prepared for it. I'm sound asleep, and I still remember it like it was yesterday. I was dreaming. I had drool coming down my chin. I was so out of it. And all of a sudden, just out of the blue, I get awakened by something I have never heard in these woods ever before in my life. And like I said, I've been hunting them since I was 8 years old. And my first thought that came to my mind was, is that a silverback gorilla? Because that's what it sounded like. It just, to try to do the sound. I mean, like you've heard, it just, and it was reverberating through my body. And it woke me from a dead of a sleep. And I wasn't terribly far from, houses around there. The nearest houses were probably a quarter mile away. But the wood patch went all the way down to the river. But my first thought was like, is that a silverback gorilla? Then I'm like, this has got to be waking other people up because it was so loud. But then again, I don't know exactly how close it was, but it sounded like it was right behind my blind. I mean, it sounded like it was right behind it. And then, it did that for, 20, 30 seconds. Then it started making this howl like a howler monkey. And I'm totally confused. I'm looking at my phone. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, what in the hell is that? I was like, and I instantly thought, I'm like, is that a howler monkey? I'm like, what? I was dumbfounded because 1 minute it sounded like a silverback. The next minute it sounded like a howler monkey. And then it was making, and I'm sure you've heard the howler monkey sounds, and it was just like vibrating through my body. And I'm in my deer blind. I'm in a chair, and I'm sitting up, and I have my crossbow in my hands. And then the very next moment is like, I don't know, maybe about, and time was hard to tell because I'm going to tell you the truth. I was scared to death. I didn't know what was going on. I was scared. Maybe about another 20, 30 seconds passed where it was making the howling sound. Then it started to make the sound that I've heard on the Sierra sounds, where it sounds like that snarling growl. I'd sound like an idiot trying to redo it.
Yeah.
But it's it just like nothing I'd ever heard before in my life. And then I'm like, and before this happened to me, I'd always believed in Bigfoot. I thought it existed. Did I think it was in Missouri? Not, possibly. I've heard of Momo the monster. I knew there was cases. Did I think I would ever have an experience? No. But the thing is, I never really researched it enough to know anything about sounds that it might make. So to be honest with you, I wasn't really even thinking Bigfoot at this time. It was just these sounds were coming at me, and I'm just like, I didn't know what it was, how to explain it. And at the point it started doing the snarling, growl, whatever sound, I do remember this. I was so scared. I sat up in my chair. I was holding my breath because I was like, whatever this is, I do not want it to know that I'm here, even though now that I look back on it, I think it knew I was there. I think it knew I was in that blind, and that's why it was doing this. Do I know that for a fact? No. But and then people have asked me, well, why didn't you look and see? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you record it? I'm like, because at that point in time, I thought I was going to die. I was fearing for my life. The last thing on my mind was, and I sat in that chair and I prayed to God. I was saying to Hail Mary over and over, praying to God, I don't want to see whatever's making that sound. I was peering out the slit in my blind, and I could hear it moving around out in the brush, in the leaves. Could I say it was bipedal? No, because my mind was so scattered at this time. It didn't matter if it was bipedal, quadruped or whatever. I just knew I heard something moving around, something making these noises. And then I heard it kind of circling around my blind. And at this point, I started praying to God. And that's when it was making the snarling sound. I was like, I don't want to see what is making the sound. I don't want it to come into this field. Because then I was clutching, all I had was a crossbow with one arrow. And I was clutching it to my chest, not breathing, just praying that I wouldn't see it. And some time passed, and it finally had quieted down, moved off. And then it was hours, like a couple hours later, maybe about 4 o'clock in the morning, I heard it again, but it was off in the distance. It was further away from me. But it still gave me the same type of fear. I mean, I was just terrified. There was no way I was leaving that blind until daylight. And then I eventually dozed off and fell asleep. And my alarm for me to get up the next morning to go hunting went off on my phone. And I was so scared, I literally ripped the battery out of my phone, shut it off, because I wanted to get it quiet as quick as I could, because I was afraid it was going to hear it and come find me. And so morning finally came. I walked to my sister's house. And just for the record, this was the last time I've been in that particular part of the woods after dark alone. But I had walked to my sister's house and I had told her about it. And she proceeded to tell me that, this was many, many years earlier, back sometime in the 70s, that she, on a few different occasions, but one particular occasion, heard something, and she said it was bipedal, walking behind her house. She was in her bedroom, and she could hear it. She never saw it either, but she could hear it. And then, like the next morning, her son was out there and found some reddish brown hair, about 6 inches long, on a barbed wire fence right behind there where she'd heard it. And they don't have cows out there. They didn't have horses. There's not really that many bears around here. And so I don't know what would have left reddish brown, 6-inch long hair. So, and she has told me on several occasions where she has heard the howls, like the Ohio howl out there. She's actually sent me a recording she took. It's not a very good one. That's the only reason I didn't send it to you, because she took it on her phone, and then she couldn't figure out how to send it to me, so she had another sister of mine record it on her phone, off of her phone, and you can barely hear it. But she said on numerous occasions she's heard the howls. She's heard heavy breathing from the woods, around the house. But immediately after this happened, after I had told her, I had met up at one point with my oldest daughter, who was 17 at the time. And I told her, I was like, I'm not crazy. I'm not making this up. I'm like, but this is what happened. And I told her what happened. And her boyfriend at the time, who was a real upstanding kid, his dad was a farmer from out there. They were churchgoers. So I don't see him making this up. But she looks at him and she goes, go ahead, tell him. And he proceeded to tell me about his dad telling him about he went out to look at some property on the Meramec, and it was about a mile west of where I was, and it was about a year prior. But him and a buddy of his had gone out to look at some property that he was thinking about buying to farm. It was getting about dusk, and he looked at me and said the sounds, when I was talking about the gorilla sounds and the howler monkey sounds, he's like, the sounds you just imitated, he said, my dad said he heard those same sounds, him and his buddy. They got scared. They jumped in their car. They started it up. And before they were able to get out of there, something had lifted the ass end of their car up off the ground. They're hitting on the gas and they're not going anywhere. His dad turns around, looks through the back glass, and he said all he could see was a dome-shaped head and shoulders just covered in hair. He said it eventually dropped the car and they got out of there. So that's about where that part of the story ends. Yeah. So, and that was the moment when I actually thought, well, maybe that is what, because then I started doing some research and going online, and because I wanted to know what I heard. Like I said, at first, I wasn't thinking Bigfoot. But when I went online and I heard like the Sierra sounds and some of the other sounds they have out there, I'm like, that's exactly what I heard. Exactly. But it was not in the distance. It was so close that I could feel it in my body. And it was just terrifying.
I bet. Have you gone back? Have you ever gone back to that property?
Well, I have not hunted out there anymore. But the cave I was telling you about, I had been going back out to that cave, and there was a couple instances out there, which I was dating a girl at the time. I'm not with her anymore, but she didn't believe me. She didn't believe my story at all. But she liked to go to that cave with me occasionally. And on one particular occasion, we went out there, and it was right about dusk, because I always made sure to get out of there before dark. So it was right about dusk. We were making our way back to the car, and we heard the howls. And we heard one off in the distance. Then we heard another. It was in a different direction, different tone. Then another. Then another. We heard 4 in total. And it was just one right after the other. And she looked at me and she's like, what was that? And I looked at her and I said, I don't know what that was, but it wasn't a coyote, and it wasn't a dog, and it wasn't a person. So I don't know what to tell you. And about a week later, went back out there, and I don't know if it was almost a year to the day. I don't remember the exact date, but it was in October again. We went out to that cave one evening, and I don't know if this has anything to do with this or not, because they do say sometimes they're attracted to females and blah, blah, blah. And I've also heard that maybe October is her mating season, but she was on her period. I don't know if I can say that or not, but
Yeah.
she, it was that time of the month for her. And she had stopped to go to the bathroom. So I don't know if that put scent out, but we made our way to the cave, and we stayed there. And like it's just like before, it was right about dusk. We were sitting on some rocks right outside the cave, just watching the river. And all of a sudden, we heard the gorilla sound again. And it was from on the other side of the river. We didn't see anything, but her eyes got as big as saucers. And she looked at me and she said, "Oh my God, that does sound like a gorilla." And I looked at her, I said, "I told you." And then I motioned to her with my finger to be quiet. And I got up and, of course I've, researched a lot since then. And I know the wood knocks mean something. What it means, we don't know. But I figured, well, maybe I can do something to scare it off. Maybe they'll think there's another Bigfoot around. I don't know. So I walked down the trail a ways, and I picked up a big log, and I smacked a tree with everything I had, and it echoed through the valley. And from where I was at, I didn't hear anything. But when I walked back to her, she said, "Oh my God, when you did that," she said, "I could hear it running up the hill." She said she could hear it running through the leaves, and she said it sounded like a scared chimpanzee going, is how she described it. And she said, "I heard it run all the way up, and it was making that sound." So, I was like, all right, well, let's take our moment and get out of here. So, that was that. And there was one other small incident when I was a kid. I do remember being out there, same area. I think I was 13 at the time, and I had a little dachshund, and we were walking down this old logging road that went past the cave I keep mentioning. And about the time we just got past that cave, she stops dead in her tracks, and she's looking up in the woods, and the hair standing up on her back, and she's growling. And I'm looking, and I don't see anything. I'm like, "What is it? What is it?" And just like a snap of a finger, she starts yelping like somebody freaking cut her tail off, and starts running as fast as she can the other direction. She takes off running, so I take off running, and the whole time we're running, I hear something running up through the leaves, through the woods, up behind us, that's barreling through everything. And we ran all the way back to the clubhouse, which was, probably about a quarter mile. It eventually stopped following us, but when we got back there, everybody's like, "Oh, that was just a deer. That was just a deer." I ain't never known a deer to chase somebody,
No. Yeah.
So, but being 13 and not knowing at the time, I just kind of wrote it off until I had more experiences out there.
Makes you wonder if they're setting up shop in that cave. And, a lot of hunters, prior to encounters, I would say most eyewitnesses who are hunters I talk to, they'll say, it's bizarre. It's like the deer just left. I haven't seen a deer and so it makes me wonder if they're kind of setting up shop in that cave. And, coming across these things, when you're hunting, I think they're doing the same thing. and I think it can become very dangerous very quickly.
Yeah, you know what? And I think you're right there, because when my first encounter, or not my first one, but when the encounter happened in my blind, I know I had actually started walking around in the woods around my sister's house, just seeing if I could see any sign of anything. And I did come across, not far from behind her house, where she said one day she said she was out there feeding the geese, and she heard really heavy, deep breathing coming from the wood line. And when I was in that area, I found a deceased deer that something had basically grabbed the top jaw and the bottom jaw and just cracked its head open. And another weird thing is, one time when we were walking, me and my ex-girlfriend were walking out to that cave, I found a freaking squirrel laying on the path that looked like it had been peeled like a banana. Like something just took it and just peeled the skin right off of it. Just the skeleton was laying on the ground. And I'm just like, you know, if a owl or bobcat or something else is going to tear into that, they're going to tear into it. But this thing looked like it had been peeled. Like the entire skin was still intact, and the fur was still all on it. It was peeled down to the head, and then the meat was eaten off the bones. And it was laying there, the bones and the skin. So, I don't know.
It's strange, you know, and there's a long history of the Momo monster where you're at. What predators do you have out there in Missouri, Pat? I mean, what?
There's some black bears. I'm sure they say, you know, there might be mountain lions, but I've never, you know, there's a few pictures on trail cams where people say, but they're not numerous. But other than that, like bobcats, you know, nothing that
it's going to rip a jaw open from a deer.
Yeah. Nothing that's going to freaking rip a deer head open or peel a squirrel like a banana.
There's not too many howler monkeys that I'm aware of in Missouri, but you know, a lot of people they do report that sound. I've had other shows where hunters have said, yeah, it sounds like a howler monkey. And for people out there, howler monkeys aren't that big, but the sound that they make is pretty terrifying. Here's a howler monkey. But that's what you kind of heard, is that howler monkey noise?
Yeah, it's exactly what I heard, except for it was just right on top of me. It was so loud that like I said, because I honestly, the next day, watched the news and looked in the paper to see if anything had escaped from the zoo, because I didn't know Bigfoot made these sounds, you know, at this point in time, until I started researching it better. But yeah, that's exactly what it sounded like.
That would wake me up in a deer stand really quick. The other sound that you talked about that listeners most listeners probably heard, but maybe there's some new listeners that have not heard, is the Ohio sound. Has that siren sound, that almost like an air raid type sound.
Yeah, and then and when I heard that, it wasn't extremely close. You know, I couldn't really tell you how close it was, but I heard, like I said, I heard 4 individuals. They all sounded different. One, if you know, and then I'm just interjecting some guessing, but it sounded like one sounded like a big male. You know, but then the other ones weren't as loud as that. But yeah, there was 4 of them. They were in 4 different spots. It was almost like they were trying to communicate to each other and figure out where they were. Maybe I'm totally wrong. I mean, but you know, that's what it sounded like to me.
Yeah, it's very strange to hear that noise because it's so odd. I remember a guy had sent me one from California, and it sounded very similar to the Ohio sound, but I knew it wasn't the Ohio recording. And I was like, where did you get this from? And I had one guy send me one from Kentucky, and it sounded just like the Ohio sound. You could tell it wasn't he didn't grab the Ohio sound and go, hey, I recorded this. It was off a little bit, but it was very similar. And that vocalization, I always wonder about that vocalization. Is it like a warning, or it just makes me wonder why they would vocalize that way? You know, what an easy way to give up your location.
Yeah, well, see, and that's why the night that I actually, because my sister says she hears it all the time out there, but I'm not out there all the time. But the night I heard it, it almost seemed like that's why they were doing it, because I heard one, then I heard another in a different spot. It was almost like they were trying to tell each other where they were at, you know, but that's just pure speculation. I don't know. You know, but it was 4 distinct different vocalizations, and they were all 4 in different areas.
And the other one that you talked about with the Sierra sounds, there's a couple different Sierra sounds. You know, there's one where it sounds like they're talking in some weird language. And the other one, I believe Ron told me that they were fighting over food. And I'll play it real quick. Yeah, and there's one, they're going da 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 da, and then one goes
Yeah,
is
that's the one where it's like an angry growl, snarl.
And that's what you heard?
That's exactly what I heard. That's when I started praying to God.
Yeah, I would have been praying too, man. The weird part is, you know, when they vocalize, what most people don't understand is not only is it terrifying to listen to, and you may disagree with me on this, Patrick, and that's cool if you do, but every time I've ever heard them vocalize, you almost kind of feel it in a weird way, like your body feels it.
Oh, no, I definitely agree with you. Yeah, because every vocalization from the first one to the second one to the third one, I felt them all. I could feel it in my body as it was, and I think it was only one individual. I know that people say a lot of times that they're usually more than one, but at this point in time, I only heard one. Maybe there was more out there. I don't know. But I definitely heard the one. But yeah, I could feel every sound in my body.
Yeah, and the other thing too, I think sometimes witnesses get crap for is the fact that you fell asleep. And you know, when you're in a position of, and I've been in this position so I can speak about it, but when your adrenaline's running so high and you're running off pure adrenaline, your heart is, you can feel it in your throat. And that is going on for so long. Once you're kind of out of that situation, you're completely exhausted. I mean, you just want to lay down. You're so wiped out. So, you know, for me, when I hear, well, I went back to sleep, I kind of get it. You know what I mean? You're so exhausted at that point because you've been running on pure adrenaline.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, it was just like, boom, I was more awake than I'd ever been in my life. And because I honestly thought I was going to die. I really did. I thought this thing's got a beat on me. I don't know what it is, but it's getting ready to bust into this blind and kill me. And, you know, like I said, you know, people were like, why didn't you look and see what it was doing it? I didn't want to see what was doing it. I was scared to death. And I've been hunting in these woods been running around in these woods daytime, nighttime, as long as I can remember. And I've never heard anything like this. And it was just like a total and complete shock to me. And you know, after it was all said and done, yeah, like you said, it was just like, okay, my body was coming down, and I did it. I wasn't as scared anymore because I wasn't hearing it, and I was safe in my blind because, well, if it wanted to come get me, it had already done it, but I was still, you know, worried. But after I fell back asleep, as soon as my alarm started going off to get up and go deer hunting again, the fear instantly came back. It was just like, and I can't even tell you how just the alarm going off scared me.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I literally grabbed my phone because I was so terrified. I couldn't even think to shut it off or shut the alarm off. I ripped the back off of it and took the battery out because I knew that was the fastest way to get it shut up, because I was so scared that it was going to hear that, come back and find me. And that's true fear.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. And it's not really, I wouldn't even describe it falling asleep. It's more like passing out from exhaustion, you know?
Yeah. It was, and I can't really give you a timeline on, all I remember is I woke up, I do remember looking at my phone. It's 2:00 in the morning, and I don't know how long this went on. I just remember I was terrified the whole time. I wasn't worried about time. It might have been a matter of 5 minutes. It might have been a matter of 15 minutes. I'm not really sure. I just remember hearing it out there, making these certain sounds. Then I hear it moving around, then making these certain sounds, then moving around, then making these sounds. And I was just like, but I knew it was very close to my blind. And, you know, I did, like I said, I heard it start to go back towards the river. That's what gave me a clue that maybe it followed me from the river. And that's what made me think about going down to the cave earlier that day, because I heard it walking back that direction. And it was about 2 hours later, I heard it again, making the you know, just the howler monkey and the gorilla noises, but it was further away and it was closer to the river. So, you know, and then after I guess that was what finally put my mind at ease, that it wasn't coming towards me, it was going away from me. And that's what, you know, when I finally fell asleep, got some rest.
Yeah, there's a couple questions I want to ask you. One is about your blind. There's a gentleman in my intro, and I played his encounter during the Christmas show. And he talks about, he thought it was someone in a ghillie suit until it stood up, and everyone heard the intro. And I had asked him, I said, was that a new blind you had put up? And if I remember right, he said, no, it had been there for a long time. Yeah. And it made me think, well, maybe that thing knew, you know, it was there and was trying to see if you were in there or not. With your blind, was it kind of a new blind that you had set up, or had it been set up for a long time? I
mean, not an extreme amount of time. It'd been there about a month. Because I did set it up before deer season. It'd been there a little while. So, you know, it wasn't, I mean, was it new? Yeah, if this thing is there all the time. But see, I'm not so sure they're there in that area all the time, because both my experiences and usually the experiences my sister has with the vocalizations and everything, they all seem to be around fall time, like they're moving through the area. And I even looked up on the BFRO site, and there was a family on the Meramec River, not far in Sullivan, which is like 10 miles from where this occurred, that had been getting like really harassed on their property by creatures, and it seemed like theirs was happening around October too. So, you know, I don't know if they just moved through there at that time, or what's going on. But I mean, my instincts, just because of, and I might be totally wrong, because I went to the cave, I've had a couple other experiences down there. I came back to my blind. I don't know, something in my mind tells me it picked up my scent and it followed me back to there. But I might be wrong.
Usually if you go with your gut, you're right. You know, in most situations, I know you're speculating, but a lot of times, I always tell people go with your gut because you're probably right. You know, your first instinct is probably right. And you may not, you know, after all of this happened, did you get up and kind of look around as far as, because you said it was kind of circling that the blind that you were in, and I think I probably would have just got the hell out of there, to be honest with you. But I'm curious, did you get a chance to look around?
I actually, the next morning, as soon as daylight hit, I got the hell out of there. But I actually did go back that afternoon, and I tried to look around. But at that time of year, there's a lot of leaf litter. This was like a really rocky area, so there wasn't, because I tried to look for, because after my sister had that was the first inkling when I went back to her in the morning, and she told me about what happened behind her house and the hair. Then I'm like, that's when it first started to click with me. Well, maybe this wasn't an escaped, you know, zoo animal or circus animal. Maybe this was a Bigfoot. So I went back, but it was in the daytime, about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I went and I checked the whole area around. You could see where things were disturbed, but I couldn't pick out or find any footprints. But there was one occasion where I actually did go back, like when me and my girl, a year later, we kept going to the cave, where I found what I thought was a footprint, but, you know, I didn't know anything about casting at that time. And I took a couple pictures. You couldn't really tell a whole lot. The track was about 18 inches long. I measured it, you know, and I put something in the picture to kind of, you know, try to give a size comparison. And it looked like, and I'll be honest with you, it looked like there was 2 tracks. Looked like there was one that was going one direction, and then another smaller one that was about 14 inches going like in the opposite direction. And this was right after a flood. So everything down, and this was right by the river. I had gone down there and I was walking to the cave and I saw these, but, you know, I didn't have enough faith in myself to, you know, because I'm not a Bigfoot researcher. I'm not them guys out there going and casting these prints and recording these sounds and getting this footage and getting pictures. So,
yeah,
you know,
it's not a research project. You're just trying to figure out what the hell's going on. I get it completely, you know?
Yeah. So, and you know, and I did I see the tracks? Yeah, I saw them. I took a couple pictures. At this point in time, I think they're on like my old Facebook page. I could probably find them if I needed to, but it just, I'm just going to say there's way more out there than these couple pictures of prints that I think needs to be brought out. You know,
yeah.
These 2 couple insignificant pictures of these prints I took aren't going to make it real or make it not real. So, you know, I haven't worried about it that much.
Yeah, I get completely what you're saying. How far away from your sister's house is a blind? You mentioned it's relatively close, but...
Oh, it was quarter mile, maybe. Quarter mile. But
really close.
It was really close, yeah. Her, you know, but where her house is, the woods back right up to it. Basically, I just walk around the corner to get to the blind. I'd walk around the corner or down the line of woods from her house turn a corner and then walk about another 300-400 yards, and my blind was sitting right there. But those woods that her house sits on and my blind sits on leads all the way to the river. So, like I said, I know I don't really think they like to come out into the open, but it was a nice little, and the meramec is, got a lot of forest on it. I don't know. And there's been a couple other incidents out there. Like I said, I've looked up on the BFRO webpage, and it seems like there was like 2 or 3 that happened like within 5-10 miles of where mine did. And then
it doesn't surprise me one bit. Let me ask you, Patrick. I mean, and it's like I said, we call it Sasquatch in the Pacific Northwest, but again, Missouri has a long history of the Momo monster. And a lot of people see it out there. And I've talked to hunters, I've talked to hikers, I've talked to people that have ran into this creature. And I'm kind of curious, when you were in your blind, what do you make of that behavior? Do you think it knew you were in there and it was intimidation to make you leave? Or do you think what was kind of your, and I know it's your opinion, but I want your opinion on what do you make of that behavior of all of the noise?
I'm going to give you, and I've said this since day one. Do I have any evidence? No. Do I have any proof? No. Do I have anything on it? No. But it was like an intuition to me. I think that it smelt another male primate, and maybe it was mating season, and I was in its territory, and it was going to get me to F out. I think because it was definitely intimidating. It was not making those sounds because it was happy. It was definitely pissed off. It was pissed off, and I almost guarantee was I trying to hide in my blind? Yes, I was trying to hide, but looking back on it, I almost guarantee he knew I was in there. He could smell me. He knew I was in there. He wanted me to go. And I don't even know where I heard it, but and this was a theory of mine I had before I had even heard it, that around October, maybe, leaves falling, maybe that's, possibly a time of the year that they mate. And I'm going to be honest with you. I think he thought there's another male primate in my area. He's got to get out. Excuse my language. I'm sorry. Yeah. He's got to get out, So that's my take on the whole thing. And I thought that from like the minute that I really thought it was a Bigfoot that was making all these sounds, that's what I thought. I in my gut, that's what I feel.
Either leave or provoke a fight. It's you're right. I mean, for such an elusive creature, you think he would have quieted down a little bit, but if he's going around in a circle, circling your blind and making these aggressive noises, obviously he's not looking for a hug. I think he did the right thing. What a lot of times, and I know you had a bow, but a lot of times, even guys who have huge guns, and they'll get out and they're face to face with these things and they think, I don't have enough firepower. And God forbid you would have stepped out, with one arrow. I think you would have been in big trouble. I think you did the right thing to just stay where you're at. Don't provoke a fight. Because he obviously was either trying to intimidate you to leave, which is I kind of think is what he was doing, or he was trying to provoke you to come out. My opinion on them vocalizing, like kind of what you heard, Patrick, has changed over the years. The ones that make me nervous don't vocalize, and they come in and they start screwing with you. Those are the ones that it's kind of, and I'm just a dumb bouncer, ex-bouncer anyway, but the guys that, they run their mouths and they tell you how big and bad they are, and they puff their chests out like baboons, and they walk around, and they're not really looking for a fight. And if they're looking for a fight, they're going to get a beating. They're looking to intimidate you, to try and make you to back off or leave. When these creatures come in and they're quiet and they're not growling, but their behavior and their movements are a little aggressive. Those are the ones that make me nervous, because you're not quite sure what they're going to do. That probably makes no sense at all, but
No, that makes absolute sense, and I totally agree with you. But just to be honest, at the time, just the sounds it was making was enough to make me think I didn't want to partake in whatever he had in mind.
No, I would have been right there with you, man. Same thing, What do you think that they are? I'm kind of curious, Patrick. After 4 years ago, this happened to you, and most guys give up hunting. Most guys, even though it's almost worse when you don't see what it is. But
yeah,
what do you think that they are?
Honestly, my opinion is I kind of go along the lines of, I do think there's some type of primate, but listening to other people's stories, even though I didn't have any, glowing balls experiences or anything like that, I think there's something way more to them than what we understand. I do think they are primate, but there's just they're definitely beyond our knowledge at the moment.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah. And I know you probably wouldn't want the same encounter, but would you want to encounter another one again?
Yes, actually, on one of your podcasts, I had heard of a story of some people talking about actually seeing one, actually not far from where I'm at. So, when I travel from my fiance's house back to my house, I am constantly on the lookout. So, but I want to have the type of experience that a lot of people say they want to have. I'd like to see it from a car doing 60 miles an hour, and I was like, oh, there's one right there. I'd like to see one. I definitely don't want to have another experience like I had. I never want to have an experience like that again. It didn't keep me from hunting. I still hunt, but I definitely never go out at night.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. It would terrify me. I mean, if I was in that hunting blind and it was circling me and making the noises, I remember the first time I heard a howler monkey. I don't remember what show I was watching, and I was like, my God, what is that? And again, they're not very big monkeys, but the noise they make, it would definitely have me reaching for a weapon. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. The first thing I did was grab my crossbow, but like I said, I clenched it to my chest when it started doing the growling, and I was like, oh my, what? This is what? And I actually had even a thought in my mind that this has got to be. And are they spiritual? I don't know, or demonic? I don't know, but I actually did have a thought in my mind when I first heard the snarling growl. I was like, this has got to be something demonic out in the woods doing this, because, like I said, I never heard of Bigfoot making them sounds before, and I was like, this is beyond the realm of anything I've ever heard of or know. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I understand when you say that, because a growl isn't like any other growl that you've ever heard. No. The only thing I would say kind of comes close to it is I heard a gator growl one time, and I didn't realize that they growl. We don't have alligators out here in the Pacific Northwest. Take that and times it by 1,000, and I've heard them growl, and I had the same comment. Imagine a demon sitting on your shoulder, growling in your ear, that's kind of whatever a demon sounds like when it growls, that's what I would imagine it sounds like. It's not like a growl from a canine or any other predator I've ever heard. It's very different.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was nothing. I'm gonna be honest with you. Every time I listen to it, because you played on the beginning of your show, every time I hear it, man, it brings me back there and it puts chills up my spine. I don't ever want to hear it in real life again.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And I appreciate you coming on, Patrick. I mean, to take the time to share what happened to you, I think it's very cool. It's hunters are some of my favorite people to have on the show, and I really enjoyed talking with you. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Well, thanks a lot for having me, Wes. It's been a great experience, and I'm going to tell you right now, your show is a great thing for a lot of people out there, and I appreciate everything you do.
Thanks again, Patrick, and thanks for the kind words. And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. If you get a chance, check out sasquatchchronicles.com. You can become a member and get additional shows. Until next time, everyone.
About limitless infinite life. She is my thunder. No wonder I'm going under the intoxicating danger I like. Save me from myself, let me drown in my black lake. Let me float away. Save me from myself, let me drown in my black lake. Beauty is a black lake, let me sail away. Beauty is a black lake, let me sail away. Darkness approaching, deep water keeps flowing. It inhales me in the stormy tide. Endless emotion, a dawn thought, a notion, an epiphany, bring the shore to life. Save me from myself.